All right, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Virtual Millionaire Show. I have with me a very special guest today for the Labor Day edition, Greg Helbeck. How you doing, brother?
I am wonderful, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you taking the time away from your busy schedule. I know you have a lot going on, and so I'm excited to kind of get into it. And this is a live show. And so for people who are tuning in live or who are catching us here after the fact, make sure to share this with a friend. Get this out there. Greg is going to be dropping some knowledge bombs on his experience as well as a lot of the things that he's doing right now in this crazy market that we're seeing. And so before we get into all of that, Greg, man, take us back. I mean, we met, I think it was probably about a half a year ago now here in Las Vegas. But for people who don't know you, fill them in. Who is Greg Helbeck?
Yeah, so I got started in 2000 and late 2015, about 7 years ago, which is crazy because I was like looking at my timetable and I was like, holy crap, that was like literally 7 years ago now. I went to a long story short, I got started in this business when I was 20, went to a free seminar in September of 2015, got the bug. I was reading books before that, so it wasn't like shocking that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I went to the seminar and they were talking about wholesaling deals and they were talking about double closing, which is when you use the buyer's money to buy the house from the seller and then keep the difference basically. And it was really appealing to me because they said you didn't need any money and I didn't have any money and you can make big paychecks. And I wanted to make big paychecks. So I remember looking at my two friends at the seminar. I turned back like that, looked behind them and I said, listen, guys, I don't care if both of you don't want to do this. I'm going to go to this next level seminar because it was an upsell, obviously. And it was like a 2-for-1 special. And I said, I bet you we can negotiate a 3-for-1 special. And my one friend, Kevin, was like, no, I don't think I want to do this. My buddy, Devin, who's a successful investor now, was like, yeah, I'll do it with you 50-50. We both spent $1,000. We went to the like upsell. It was like a boot camp or whatever. And we learned the nuts and bolts of wholesaling, rehabbing, and all that kind of stuff. That was still in September. That was like mid-September, early. I forget. It was like mid-September, late September. The first seminar was in early September. It had been Labor Day weekend, honestly. I got to go back and look. But long story short, we started going out and marketing, and we wanted to be wholesalers. And it took me 9 long months to get a deal. I had no idea what I was doing. Still barely know what I'm doing. I think everyone who's successful is pretty much winging it. They just have a little bit more experience, right? That's the truth. And landed on a deal 9 months later. I think I made $1,000 on that deal. It was like a tiny little referral deal. And then a couple months after that, I made $5,000 wholesaling a house because I was splitting a 10K assignment fee. So I got $5K to me. The other guy made 5. And I started just slowly but surely collecting some paychecks from this business in New York, which is like one of the hardest markets to do business in, if not the hardest because of the attorneys. And I just stumbled into wholesaling, right? And it was a 20-year-old kid with no experience and no money. And long story short, about 2 years after that, I started to really understand marketing and virtual wholesaling, which is the theme of the show. And I started actually like running real marketing campaigns and systematically getting leads and learning a sales process and all that stuff. And in 2018, I got to the point where I was still a one-man show. I was doing, 3, 4, 5 deals a month with like basically no overhead, making, 20, 30, $40,000 per deal. I was splitting that with someone in Texas on a JV basis. So I was still making good net money. And I was able to virtually, get the business to a point where I didn't physically need to be there anymore because all these deals were actually in Texas at the time. And I can get into why I did that, later on.
Yeah.
And I was able to move to San Diego and not have to worry about my, being physically involved in a market. So I was able to run everything remotely through the computer, through the phone, through other people. And, to this day, I still have the business running virtually. Primarily, we're buying in the Northeast, right? In the New York area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, mostly like the New York City area. And I still do some deals here and there in San Diego where I live. And I love the business, Mike. I really do. Like a lot of people use this business as like a means to an end. And I really like the business and the fun of deal making and now being a leader with my team that like really gets me excited every day. And that's why like on Labor Day, I choose to work. I don't have to work. I choose to work. And to me, it's fun. So if I can get closer to my goals every day, I don't care if it's Christmas, New Year's, it doesn't matter to me. I just want to do what I want to do. And at this point, I choose to work, and I love it.
I absolutely love it, man. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but what I love most about this is the story sounds so familiar. When you interviewed me, I don't know, is it 6 months ago, however long it's
Yeah.
been,
Yeah.
like I know how you were feeling because you went to the seminar, you spent $1,000, and you put it kind of out there. You're like, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to go for it. And you didn't quit until you started having some success, even after, would you say 12 months? 12 long
9
months?
months to get a paycheck.
9 months to get a
For 9
paycheck.
months. Yeah.
Mine was 7, but at that point in time, you really start to wonder if this is going to work.
Yeah.
And $1,000, you know, if you know a lot about real estate, you know that it's not hard to spend $1,000 on marketing real quick.
Do
And
that in like an
so,
hour, dude.
yeah,
An hour.
you could do that real quick. But
Yeah.
super cool how you did that, and then also to New York out of all places, right?
Super hard.
That's a very tough market. And so you were living there,
hard. Yeah.
and were you doing stuff virtually in Texas for a little bit?
So I'll tell you, I'll give you the background on that. So what happened was I started doing deals in New York, and it was really difficult as a brand newbie because in New York, there's really two things that are difficult. Well, there's many, but the first thing is that the attorneys run the entire transaction. So you can't just go to a seller. Well, most of you can do it sometimes, but most of the time when you get a seller to accept your offer, they hire an attorney and you hire an attorney, and the seller's attorney prepares the actual contract. You don't slip a contract over the table like you do in most of the country. And when they send you a contract, they normally want a 10% deposit, non-refundable. So if I'm buying a house for 500K, standard practices, they want 50 grand down. Okay. So you can negotiate that, and we negotiate that. We put on average like 1 to 5 grand down hard on every deal most of the time. So back when I had no money, I mean, they were asking for 5, 10 grand down, and I just didn't have it. Or if I had it, like that was like all the money I had. So
Right.
it's really not going to work. So it was difficult. So the attorneys and the deposits were a challenge. So I kept running into that obstacle, and I was making up an excuse. I'm like, oh, my market's too hard. Oh my God, these attorneys are ridiculous.
Right.
And I said, well, why don't you try this in another market? And if it's easier, there you go. And if it's not easier, then you're just an idiot. So I randomly picked Dallas, Texas. Reason is because I knew that there was a lot of people living there. And I knew that there was like, it was pretty like business friendly down there. Like you don't need to probate properties. You can do airship affidavits. And like, there was a lot of like just activity there. So I figured I was actually an investor fuel, and I was in Dallas, and I'm like, let me just try this down here. Everyone seems to be making money down here. So let me try it myself. And it was definitely a lot easier at the time. And there was really no calling. Like this is back when cold calling and texting were like not saturated.
Right.
And like literally 1 out of 6 leads was like a deal, just because I was targeting like really distressed properties, and like no one else was really talking to them.
Right.
So it was honestly kind of easy. Listen, I was working a lot. I was putting a lot of effort into it, but I was really targeted and focused and strategic. So when we got a lead, they were really qualified, and I needed about 6 leads at the time to get a deal. And we were making $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a deal. I was splitting that with someone, but still it was great money.
All right.
We were doing, 3, 4, 5 of those a month. And there was no attorneys. There was no bullshit deposit. We were putting down like $100, and I was making a lot of money. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like I remember the first time I locked up a house virtually through DocuSign. I thought it was a scam. Like the lady signed it, and I'm like, that's it? Like what next? And like, I was like, let's take it to the title company. And I'm like, this is like probably a scam, right? Like, cause in New York, it's so complicated and so different. Like
it almost seems too good to be true, right? Even when we're transacting daily, it's like,
yeah,
okay, sign the document. Cool. Now what? Well,
yeah,
it goes to the title, and that's it. Yeah.
It makes no sense. And then like, I'm like, oh, now I know how people do 15, 20 deals a month. They're not in New York.
Right. Right.
New York, that's difficult. I mean, you could do it. But it's just, you're going to have a big backlog of like accepted offers that are not in contract.
What happened since though? Because Dallas, I've heard, is a lot different market than it was 5 years ago.
I'll tell you what happened. So what I was doing at the time is I would get a list. So what ended up happening, like I did a deal in New York, and I made like 15 grand wholesaling it. And it was like the most money I ever made at the time. And I'm like, why did I get this deal versus like other leads? And it was a vacant property. It had delinquent taxes, and the owner was dead. So there was the trifecta, they call that, of distress: dead, taxes, vacant. And I asked myself a question. I said, what if I can just market to prospects who meet this criteria? Like that would probably be interesting. And I went into Dallas, and the way that I started making money pretty quickly was I downloaded a tax delinquent list from realacquisitions.com, like regular website that anyone can get a list from. And there was like 7,000 delinquent tax properties, I think, in Dallas and Tarrant counties, which are the two big counties there. One is in Fort Worth. Tarrant County is Fort Worth. Dallas County is obviously Dallas. And I had another piece of software called AccuZip at the time. And now you can use all these list stackers. It's the same shit. But basically, I would take that list and I would upload it into the software. And it would take all of the 7,000 records and it would just tell me all the vacant properties that are out of those 7,000 records. So it basically took about 10% of them. So now I had this laser targeted list of vacant tax delinquent properties. And then I had another software, or I think it was the same software, that basically told you the owners who were dead through skip tracing. So then I would just take these like laser targeted properties and I would just cold call the heirs of these estates basically. And I'd say, hey, would you consider selling XYZ property? And they would say, I didn't think I owned it. I'm like, well, who do you think owns it? Oh, I thought the taxes got it. Well, you still technically own it. You know, I could buy it from you. You know, you owe 20 grand. Would you consider getting 10K in your pocket and I take care of the taxes? And they would say, yeah. And in Texas, like I said earlier, there was no probate. You could do an heirship affidavit and then all the siblings just got to be on the same page and you could sell it without taking it through probate. So it was pretty easy. And there was no one really doing it, right? There was not a lot of people doing this. There was no software for texting. The cold calling was barely getting utilized. So I was not running into a lot of competition. Like it was like me, maybe one other person, but it was like barely anything. And there was a lot of these properties. What happened over time is I got really good at this and I started taking all these prospects from my cold list and they were in my warm database. So I started running out of like these really targeted properties because I had most of them already in my CRM. They either didn't answer the phone or they didn't want to sell or whatever the case was.
Right.
I started to see like this gravy train was probably going to end soon. I either had to do this in a different market or change my business strategy. So when I started, I had no money. By the time I was done doing deals in Dallas, I had a good amount of money saved up from just wholesaling and we started flipping properties too. So I said, well, what if I took the capital I have now and started actually investing it like a human being in New York? Because I always knew the spreads were big there, but it was just harder to get deal flow because like I didn't have the money to market at the time and the sales cycle was long. So I started actually reinvesting a lot of that profit into marketing in New York. And that's how we basically built our business in New York over the last like 3 or 4 years.
Okay. That all makes sense now. So when
Yeah.
you figured it, you cracked the code, right, in Dallas, you started implementing the same strategy in New York. And at that time you were doing texting, right? Is what you were doing. What else were you doing to find deals in New York? Because I think you've talked about doing direct mail before, right?
Yeah. So what ended up happening was the calling and texting in Dallas slowed down. I had a good run from like 2018 to 2020 where we probably banged out 45, 50 houses down there and made serious cash.
Right.
But then once that slowed down, I was doing the same thing in New York with the calling and texting. And New York is even like the area I'm in is smaller than Texas. Like just like New York City's huge, but like the suburbs, there's probably like 4 million people, 5 million people. Right. Dallas, there's 10 million people. So we started doing the calling and texting stuff and it was working pretty well. But same thing, like we were running out of prospects. Like there's only so many people who have a vacant tax delinquent deceased owner property in any certain area. So I said, why don't I stop doing it? Because that was taking a lot of time up, right? But like I had money at the time. I had money then, like so I could actually take that money and buy advertising, direct mail. So we were doing the calling and texting. That was still working pretty well, but we really were like running out of prospects again. And I was like, all right, well, why don't I just take some of this money I have and start like doing direct mail campaigns and then I can have sellers call me versus me having to call them. So that was in let me think about this for a minute here. Probably 2019-ish started doing that, like hardcore, maybe late 2018, early 2019. Started doing a lot of just direct mail and, sending like back in the day, which is like 3 years ago, we were sending like 6,000 postcards and getting 2 or 3 deals, which is like insane nowadays. That like does not work anymore. You have to send like 15,000 out. It still works.
Right.
So yeah, we started just doing direct mail, doing big postcard campaigns and getting like 2-3% response rates. And out of that, about half of those prospects were actually leads. And, maybe 1 out of 20 offers were converting and we're doing the same thing. Right. And at that time too, like I could rehab the properties. I could flip them. Like I could wholesale them. I could wholesale them. I had a lot of different exit strategies. So that's how we like slowly transitioned our business from more of a prospecting company to more of an inbound lead kind of company.
I feel like it's a really natural progression. And by the way, how does it feel to have leads coming into you versus you having a prospect for every single lead?
10 times better.
Conversations are different, aren't they?
Yeah, they're different. with the stuff in Texas, I will say, like, it was so targeted, so it was almost like they were inbound lead because like they basically gave up on the property.
Motivated.
But when you have enough money to spend on marketing, where you're getting calls, like whether they're PPC ads or they're SEO leads or they're even direct mail, people are shit on direct mail. It's like, yo, they're calling you. They might not be happy you send them a postcard, but they made the choice to call you. They could have thrown it out, right?
That's right.
So like, it's still a good lead. And like, you know, some of our best deals we've ever done were from people calling us from postcards. Like, it's all about timing.
Oh yeah.
So I think when you can get to the point where you can spend a minimum, like when you have a minimum marketing budget, like maybe let's say $2-3 grand a month, and you can commit for 6-7 months to like actually put that in the mail or Google or whatever. I mean, it's just going to make your job a lot easier as a real estate investor. Like, you're going to have predictable people to speak to. You're going to have predictable offers to make. And then you're eventually going to have predictable cash flow, right? Because you're just going to have the funnel be able to fill itself up.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And what you said is predictability. And so
Yeah.
consistency leads to predictability. You know, it's one thing to send out one campaign and hope you get it back, but we both have been in the business long enough to where we know that for listeners out there who might be doing these things, but maybe haven't stuck with it long enough to get a deal, just know that it works. Just stay consistent with it. And over time, your return should be good enough to continue doing it. So, you know, let's kind of shift gears a little bit, Greg. You shifted back to New York. At what point did you decide to move to San Diego?
I moved to San Diego in July of 2018. So I moved, I was in college this whole time when I started and whatnot. And I was still going to class. I think I went from college, I did 4 years. So from 2015 to 2018, I think. Like, I mean, I think I did it 3. I don't know. Time flies. But basically, I was still in college and I started to make decent money. Like, my senior year, I was like doing deals every single month, like making real money. But I still had to physically be in New York because I needed to graduate, right? So once, this was in May, I graduated. May of 18, I graduated. And then July of 18, I moved to San Diego. So I wanted to financially be able to do it. Like, I wanted to have a certain amount of money in the bank and have a certain predictability within my business. And that happened while I was in college. Once I graduated in May of 2018, in July, I moved to San Diego. And I didn't physically need to be there anymore. That was the biggest thing too. Like, if I needed to physically go on appointments, it would be really tough to do that. And nowadays with all the virtual stuff, it's like you can do it over the phone, but that was still kind of like getting pioneered at the time. Yeah. People were like, oh my God, how do you buy a house over the phone? It's like, I don't know, you just do it. But anyway, so yeah, that was in July of 2018. I moved to San Diego because I didn't physically need to go to the houses. Because in Texas, I had a guy I was JVing with. And if it was a New York deal, I could just have someone I knew go on the appointment or whatever. But most of our business was in Texas at the time, so it really didn't matter.
Got you. And so how was that transition to San Diego? You know, at that point, you probably had a pretty good lead flow coming in, I would imagine, in New York. Did you open up our operation in San Diego at all right away, or did you do much?
It took me like 2 years to get my head out of my ass and start doing deals in San Diego. I still don't do a lot of volume out here. Like, I probably do 4 to 5 houses a year in San Diego, but the spreads are ginormous out here. Like, you can make, you know, $65,000 on an assignment, and that's like not a big deal because of the price point. So I was a little reluctant to do it for a while. I was like scared, and I was like, "Oh my God, this market's so hard. These sellers,
Isn't that funny? Like, we get in our own way, in our own heads.
The stupidest thing ever. I probably left $500K on the table.
I've been in Vegas for 3 years, and I'm not consistent.
I just did a deal in Vegas, by the way.
You did?
Yeah.
Wholesale?
Over on Grayling. Yeah. From
really? Yeah. How did that one come about?
PPC seller somehow reached out to us, and she was in Vegas. And that was like a $23K assignment. I never saw the house.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah, it was like last month.
You should have called me. I might have been a buyer for it, but probably wouldn't have paid as much as the buyer who bought it from you. I would imagine.
Who bought that property? I forget his name. I don't know. He was a decent guy. He paid cash. But anyway, but the point you were trying to make with Vegas, like when you moved to Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, why it's right in my backyard. I hear of people doing 6-figure deals here all the time.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I plug in my marketing machine? But I think in my mind, we were getting such great returns on our marketing dollars back there. And then just from hearsay, you're like, these people over here are spending how much per deal to get a deal? And I'm spending this much and my deal average is this.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't wrap my head around spending the kind of money on marketing to get that lesser result, at least in my self-limiting beliefs. And so I would assume maybe that's what was going on in your head at that time in San Diego.
So it's funny how you say that, because I I was reluctant to do it. I would kind of dabble once in a while. And I went out to lunch with my friend a couple of years ago, and he's a smart guy, not discount. He's a smart guy. But I'm like, if he can, so the way I looked at it was like, if he can do this, I can certainly do this. Because he was telling me about the deals he was doing, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, wow, like I can definitely do this business in Southern California. So I committed to actually marketing out here, like not dabbling. Like at the time it was texting. I'm like, I'm going to send, and this is me, like no team.
Yep.
I'm going to send a certain amount of texts out every day in San Diego through Lead Sherpa, and I'm going to get a damn deal. And it took me like 4 months. And I remember, never forget, 8989 Lamar in Spring Valley. The guy responded and he said, I want 300 for my property. And it was a 2-family duplex, whatever they call it. They call it duplexes out here in New York. We call them 2 families.
Sounds like a home run already.
Yeah, it was. And oh my God, if I knew what I knew now, I would have made like 150 on it. But anyway, he's like, I want 300K. I met him at the property, locked up. I met him at the property. He said yes to the offer. Like I made sure he wasn't bullshitting. And then he lived in Catalina Island. So he went back to Catalina Island. And I remember I mailed him the contract. And then he mailed it back to me, like through the post office. It was hilarious.
So you didn't come prepared with the contract. You had to mail it.
He wouldn't. Yeah. I had to mail it. I didn't bring it there.
Were you wondering if he was going to sign that thing? I would have been concerned if it was that easy of a.
Yeah, I didn't really want to push him because he seemed like a kind of a sophisticated guy. And anyway, he ended up signing the contract. And I remember I got the contract back in the mail, and I was like, oh shit, what do I do with this thing? Oh my God, I got to deal in San Diego. And I found this one guy who like bought a property on the road. And he like lowballed the shit out of me, and I was like, oh my God, it's not a deal.
Yeah.
I went in a Facebook group, and I was like, there's no way this is not a deal. Because this one guy was just trying to like take my pants off. And I'm like, he was, he probably knew I didn't know the area that well. I just didn't know what to do.
Right.
And I went on a Facebook group, San Diego, it's like San Diego, like friends and family real estate, some BS group that has like 70,000 people in there. And I was like, hey, I got a duplex in Spring Valley. Who wants it? I got 70 people on my email address. 70 people, like put their email in there, put it into my email software, sent out the deal. And I had a guy, his name, the 2 guys, Ben and Dan. I won't mention their last names. They're good friends of mine. And I didn't know them at the time. And they said, and I put it out for $340. And I thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And they said, meet me at the property. We want this. We are going to sign this. And let's do business right now. And like, I was like, oh, no way. And I remember we went to the property. We signed the assignment agreement for $340. And I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. Boom. And it closed like 3 weeks later. And I was like, wow, this is insane. I just made 40 G's on a deal. And I went to this house like 3 times and met with this weird tenant to like get him to kind of move out and even.
Right.
Yeah. And like, I was like, wow. And then after that, I was like, I'm definitely doing another one of these. And I'll never forget, while I was doing all this marketing, I had this one lead that came in City Heights, which is like a kind of the ghetto, but it's a really good area to do deals. It's like decent during the day. And I remember this guy inherited a property. His name's Walter. I'm not going to say his last name, but if he's watching, Walter, you're the man. And he was like going to sell the discount, but he wasn't ready to sell yet. So I followed up with this guy like a banshee. And I remember in December, he was like, all right, I'm ready to sign. I'm ready to sell. Like, and we went to the property and I made him another offer. And he said, no again. And I'm like, well, what's going to get you to sign? And he told me, I think it was like $340 or something, like still pretty cheap for City Heights. And I made $70,000 wholesale on that one.
Dude.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is insane. And
you're talking 110 G's over 2 deals.
Yeah.
What's the ROI on that? Like you couldn't have spent that much.
Dude, probably like 15 to 1, probably more. Because it's like, was it $1,000 a month, like all in with skip tracing?
Right.
So it just opened my eyes up to where like the point of that story is not to be like, oh my God, I'm the king of deals. It's like, it takes the same time and effort to make $70,000 on a wholesale deal than it does to make 2. It's the same process. It's the same paperwork. It's just changing the price, right? That's all you're doing. So it got me to realize like I can focus on doing big deals or I can focus on doing small deals and it's going to be the same process. And in New York, like until the market changed, our average wholesale fee was like $30,000, like in New York, right? So it's like the same process. Now with the market change, yeah, we're doing more novations. We got to buy deeper. The buyers are a little bit harder to sell to. And that's just given with any market shift. But it's still like 25 grand. We're still making big wholesale fees. Yeah. And it's the same process. It's the same exact process. So you got to get into your head, like you're going to do the work to get the deal no matter what, whether it's you or your team, and you're going to do the work to sell the deal too. You might as well make the most money because it's going to be the same work.
Yeah, dude, such a good point. And we've all done the deals that are like super thin margins.
Yeah,
And how much brain damage are those deals? It's like almost the smaller the deal, the more of a
the
headache
worse
it
it is.
is.
Yeah, because it's like the
It,
seller's up your butt and the buyer's like beating you up over the price, and everyone's like squirrely, and it's like, oh,
yeah.
you're trying to force a deal almost, you know?
Yeah, man. So since then, though, tell me about how you have your business set up, because I think you have some local boots on the ground, maybe in New York potentially. What's your operation look like
Yeah.
today?
So right now I have a small team of 3, including myself. So it's me, and the roles that I sit in right now, I sit in the disposition department, and I sit in the overall, just kind of like, I guess, COO. I don't like the word COO because it's a 3-man company,
Right.
but I pretty much run the entire business, like in terms of the operations, and I sell the properties, and I still handle some of the transaction stuff if my assistant can't handle that. Then I have an assistant who's local in LA, and she handles the text message marketing. She handles all my media stuff for the podcasts and social media. And then she handles the transaction coordination on files. And then
Okay.
I have a full-time acquisitions manager who actually lives in Delaware. So he buys virtually over the phone. And if it's a Delaware deal, he'll go on the appointment if it's necessary. But he's locking 95% of these deals up over the phone, right? 95%
Incredible.
just need to go to the property, and we'll get the stuff done on the phone.
Yep.
So that's our business. So he deals with all the sellers and, all that drama that takes a lot of time up that I, like to do, but really can't do at this point
Yep.
because there's just so many other things to do. So I have a small team, not a lot of like, I don't have like 4 salespeople and 17 transaction coordinators or any of that stuff. Like I like the lean, mean team. And I'll tell you some of the reasons I like it. Number one, the 3 of us can all make a lot of money because there's a lot to share, right?
Yep.
When we do a deal, everyone can make a lot of money. And number two, like you can keep your. With that being said, you can have a high margin still because you don't have a ton of overhead. Like my acquisitions person gets paid when deals close. My assistant gets paid a fixed, she gets paid fixed like a salary, but then she also gets a fee, like a fixed fee on every deal that closes that she worked on.
It's amazing.
So I can keep my overhead somewhat low. I mean, I still have overhead, but reasonably low. And everyone can be incentivized to make a lot of money when deals close, which is good because if you have like a bunch of people on payroll and you have a shitty month or a shitty 3 months, you got to cut people or else you're not going to be in business.
Yeah, man, I love that perspective because, there's a lot of people puffing their chests out there,
Yeah.
and, we're actually becoming a fairly decent sized organization with the amount of overhead and the amount of employees that we have.
Yeah.
And I totally can understand how peace of mind that would be for you to be able to keep more profit if it's lean and mean. I love that concept. But yeah, man, there's a lot of people out there who are saying they're making, it's this big team that's making 400,000 or 500,000 a month. But at the end of the day, they're probably bringing home just as much, if not maybe less, than some
Yeah.
of these smaller teams. Granted, yes, they have their business completely running without them. But it just goes to show you that no matter which way you decide to do it, they both work, and it's all about preference. And
Yeah.
I like both ways, honestly. I love the way your approach is.
Yeah. And we're still doing like good volume. Like I think 2 months ago, we had 9 deals. Last month we had 5. We should get, 6 or 7 this month. So we still make a lot of money, but
Super
we just have a
impressive.
we have a lower overhead, and everyone has to be better at what they're doing, because we don't have a huge team. So like Brett works his butt off, Anna works her butt off, I work my butt off.
Right.
And, I'm slowly building it to where I want to step more out of the business. But like I said earlier, I really like the business. So to me, it's fun, right? Like I
Yep.
like the day to day at this point, and it's to the point where I've really tried my best to study productivity and time management and being efficient and effective to where I don't need to run around like a maniac all day. And I just got to get the critical tasks done so we can still grow and prosper. And I think I definitely am. You know, I'd rather hire a really solid team member and have that take a lot longer than hire like 3 shitty employees and have to go through that turnaround and then, just waste my time.
Yeah.
So like it took me a while to hire an acquisitions person because I wanted to find the right person who really knows what they're doing. And same thing with my assistant. Like I really vetted them out to where like if they come on board, like, they're a core team member. And I deeply care about them and I want them to win.
Absolutely, man. And by the way, how important is acquisitions? Like it's everything for our
Everything,
business.
man. It's the whole
So
business.
let's talk about that in a virtual setting. So
Yeah.
you you obviously figured out how to do this over the phone.
Yeah,
What's that look like? So when the lead comes in, is your guy calling and one shot closing them? What's it look like?
I wish. I mean, listen, most sellers are going to need follow up, right? So, and what that could be a follow up for 3 months, or it could be a follow up for 3 days, like to get all the decision makers on board. But what our process is normally now, a lead comes in, they get called. We have pretty much everyone goes to voicemail for like mail and stuff. We don't answer live, except for PPC, they answer live. But anyway, lead comes in right away. Someone will call them back. Like Brett will get on that right away. And like, if it's the weekend and like I'm doing nothing and like a lead comes in, I'm still gonna answer the phone. Like I'm the one paying for it, so I might as well.
Absolutely.
Unless I'm like in Singapore, which I'll be doing next week. But anyway, lead comes in right away. We'll call them back usually within 2 or 3 minutes, right? Unless we're bogged down with leads, and we'll figure it out. But we get back to them immediately. They get qualified. Like our sales process, we lean heavy on qualification, right? Because we get a lot of leads, and you can't spend a lot of time with unqualified people. So we'll ask them, why are they selling? What's the condition like? How come you don't want to list your house on the market? My favorite question, by the way, because that's going to tell you the truth.
Love that question.
And then, if we were able to solve your problem, what price would you want to sell it for, considering the fact that we need to make a profit? Keyword there is considering the fact that we need to make a profit. Obviously,
you actually say that.
Of course we do. Yeah, because
okay.
If they're not a fit and they don't understand exactly what to expect from us, we're doing them a disservice by being on the phone with them. So we obviously started with, hey, listen, you got to be happy with the offer or else you're not going to sell us the house. But it also has to make sense for us. We have to be able to make a profit.
Right.
With all that being said, what would a number be for you that will allow you to move on, or et cetera, but also still allows us to make a profit? So we're trying to condition them to have them give us a number, considering the fact that we need to make money on the deal.
Dude, I love that.
Dude,
I think we need to just, I think people just need to stop right here for a second. If you're new to this business, what he just said might sound scary, because a lot of times it's like, oh, I don't want these people to know that we're making a profit. These people know they're selling to us because we're a business. And the more transparent you can be, like Greg just said, the easier business becomes. It makes it so much easier when you can just ask them, like, hey, have you thought about listing it? Like, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? You cover all your bases, and you teach a lot about the sales process, which is why I really wanted to slow down right there, because what you said is super, super key to like disqualify that person if they're not going to ever do business with you.
Dude, the best thing you could do is disqualify sellers, like in a strategic way, not in like a douchery way. Like being honest with the seller, like, hey, Mr. Seller, I want to help you out and I'd love to solve your problem, but I'm going to let you know if you have a problem that I can't solve for you. And if usually I'll give you an example. There was a guy today. Brett was on the phone with someone else. It was like a referral lead. So like my friend texted me the guy's number. Like I'll just call him myself.
Right.
And he wanted $350 for this property. And I'm like, listen, I get why you want $350. I totally understand why you're asking that price. You got to put this on the market, my man. We can't, we're not a good fit. And when you say that, what happens? Two things. They either agree with you and they appreciate you being upfront, which is amazing for credibility.
For sure.
Or they start justifying why you need to make a profit. And it's insane. And if
motivation all of a sudden pours.
I got someone to call me. Oh my gosh, no way. But when you have the mindset where you don't need the deal, which even if you need the deal, you have to have the mindset where you don't need the deal, because then you're going to negotiate from a place of power.
100%.
If you can always walk away from a deal, you're going to get more deals because of the psychology and then the way you're going to follow the process. Like people know, like when we speak to sellers, they know we're there to help them if we can help them. And we're not going to do a shitty deal just to do a deal. We're going to walk away. And it's like the most empowering thing if you're a salesperson or if you're a one-man show, if you just tell the truth to the seller. Listen, Mr. Seller, if you're not happy with the price, you're never going to sell us the property. And I totally understand that. So you kind of let them out of jail. At the same time, Mr. Seller, it's got to be a number that works for you, but it's also got to be a number that allows us to make a reasonable profit as well. And I want to make sure we're on the same page about that. That one line will save you so much time.
Dude, I love that. Yeah. I see. We say something to that effect, except for it's not exactly verbatim, but I love the way that came off, because it immediately like puts everyone kind of at ease. It's like, okay, like this guy's in business, and if he's going to do it, it's going to work. And if not, totally fine. And it's a great way to do business.
Put it this way, Mike, let's change the industry for a minute. Let's say I own a software company, and I know that if you potentially bought my software and you were a fit, you would make a lot of money, right? I would say
common. It's expected, right?
Yeah. I'd say, Mike, listen, we're going to talk today about the software and how it might be able to help you. Obviously, after I ask you some questions and answer any questions, we'll probably get to that point. Obviously, it's got to be at a budget that works for you, but I'm also not going to discount my price, and I'm not just going to give you a crazy deal to give you a crazy deal. So at the end of this call, if you think my product solves a problem for you, we can certainly have a conversation about moving forward. But at the same time, if you don't think my product can solve a problem for you, I wouldn't want your money, because I wouldn't want to, waste your time. So you're like setting the grounds to where like you're almost agreeing to do a deal before you even do a deal. And it lets the guard off of the seller. Like, hey, Mr. Seller, if you don't think this is going to be a fit, I'm not going to pressure you to sell me your house. Heck, it's your house, right? So it's your decision. But I'm also not going to roll over like a dog and make you an offer that's too good to be true and waste your time either.
Right.
And sellers, I'm telling you, man, they freaking love it. They love it because most other people are not doing that. They're like, trying to convince the seller that they should take this lowball offer because it makes sense. It's like, what?
Dude, this is so powerful, like insane value. So guys, if you're getting value, make sure to let Greg know. Drop it in the comments, drop some fire emojis, man. This is good stuff. And honestly, if you take anything away from this, that sales tip right there that he just gave you will help you make a ton of money. And so appreciate you sharing that, man. That's good stuff.
My pleasure, bro.
So you're taking these people through. Are you giving only people who are qualified an offer? Are you kind of testing the waters a little bit based on their flexibility on that that question?
That's a good question. So we pretty much will make everyone a ballpark offer, because some people will like say no right now, but then if they had that offer, or if they knew the offer, maybe something changes and they follow up with you and you have something to follow up about, hey, that offer.
Yep.
But if they're not a fit, we'll basically disqualify them and say, listen, I know you want 300 for the house. It's worth about 300. I think your best bet is to list it. If you wanted to see what our cash offer would be, we'd probably be in between 150 and 175. And we know that's probably not going to be a fit. So I'm guessing you're going to say no to that. So we like assume the no.
Right.
This is an unqualified lead. And then we just follow up with them, or like we have the system follow up with them if they're unqualified. But if they are qualified and they are a fit, and there's definitely a problem we can solve, we're a lot more strategic on how we will make the offer. And we try to wrap the offer around the problem that we're trying to solve. So for example, there's another guy today that was on the phone with us, and it was really about like a long story short, he lives out of state. His wife's pissed that he's not making half of the mortgage payment on his personal house, and she's making the whole payment. And the first like part of the call was like, oh my gosh, my tenants in this other rental property are a pain in the ass, and blah 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 blah. And I don't want to fix the septic, and blah blah. He just
all the motivation.
Yeah, all those reasons. And he never mentioned this thing with his wife, right? He just kept brushing that off. And then he said something that made like a black swan, as Chris Voss would say. And I was like, oh, tell me more about that. Oh, well, and then he said his wife's pissed that he's not making the personal mortgage payment. She's making the whole thing. So instead of, I made him a low offer because his house like needs a lot of work. But I said, listen, it's really not about you getting the most money or you getting like lowballed on this house. It's really about you not disappointing your wife. And it sounds to me like more important. It's true. And dude, the thing is, like, when you talk to enough sellers and you have that mindset I said about not giving a shit in a good way, you'll say that because it's like, that's the truth. And a lot of people are afraid to say the truth. And he's like, yeah, you're exactly right. I said, here's the deal. If your main pain point is not letting your wife down, if we structure this deal to where for the 4 months we're in escrow, I'll pay half your mortgage payment. So you come to the table with half the money from me, and your wife's not pissed at you. And I'll give your tenant $1,000 to leave. Because it sounds to me like you not letting your wife down is more important than you taking a lowball offer on this house. And he's like, you're right. So I said, you should consider that. Let's touch base tomorrow, because it is an actual decision he's got to think about. And I believe him there. And then here's where a lot of people are scared. All right. When you propose an offer and the seller says, I got to think about it, right? Which happens. You can't listen. A lot of times if the seller has to think about it, it's bullshit. But sometimes they actually have to think about it. And you got to understand when you talk to enough people, like when to push and when to not push.
Right.
So he said he had to think about it. And I said, that makes total sense. Can I ask you a quick question, Mr. Seller? And he said, yeah, sure. I said, is this something you'd consider, or probably not? Because you can just let me know and I'm not going to be upset. I want to try to help you. But if you don't think this is a fit, you can just let me know. And it's not a big deal. And he's like, no, I really like this offer. So the point of that question is that if they're just going to BS you, you just ask them on the spot. And if like, there's no way I'm going to consider that. And then that's fine. That's totally fine. No harm, no foul. And at least you kind of know where you stand. Because a lot of people like, well, here, I got to think about it. And they'll get all excited. And when you talk to enough sellers, you know, most of the time they're lying. So when you
Yep.
go in and drop that question/statement, you're just going to get the truth, you know?
You give them permission to give you the
Yeah.
truth. You
You give
by
them
asking
permission.
that second question.
Yeah. And it's just like simple. Hey, is this something you'd really consider or probably not? It's
Yeah.
as simple as that. And like, it's like, it lets all the pressure off, right? It like
Uh-huh.
releases the energy from the pressure of that deal and it puts the ball in the seller's court. And
Yeah.
it's like when a seller sees that you're trying to solve their problem versus just make them an offer, they're going to appreciate your offer a lot more than just like, hey, Mike, I'd offer you 115 for your property in Poughkeepsie. It's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Or
Good luck.
yeah, you know, it's like, oh, thanks. Let me never call you back. But if
Right.
you're like, hey, listen, I want to help you out and I want to make this a custom solution to your problem, and this is how I can do that, you know, they're going to be more receptive to hearing that low offer because you're trying to bring value to the table versus just make them an offer on their house.
Right, right. Man, good stuff. And are you typically having that first qualification call and then following up with
Yeah.
another call to
Yeah.
finalize that offer to
So they
make
get
sure you're doing your
screened.
homework?
Brett will screen them usually, and then he'll talk to me about it. And like I sit in the underwriting seat too, so I'll like go through the numbers and make sure like the deal makes sense.
Right.
And then I'll give him a number to present, and then he'll go back on the phone and present the number and go from there. That's like a
Gotcha.
two-step process, and then it's either accepted or it's a follow-up after,
Got it. Perfect.
after that.
Yep. And I think that's the key. I think a lot of people in the beginning, especially when they get a lead on the phone, they kind of get excited, even if they feel like it's a deal. They may
Yeah.
rush that offer, and a lot of
Yeah,
times
don't do that.
it
Just
blows the
slow it
deal.
down. Slow it down. You want to, and another thing too with like virtual investing is there's not a lot of resistance because you just make the offer on the phone, right? You want to make sure you're doing your due diligence and you're actually like making an intelligent offer. Maybe you got
For
to send
sure.
someone out there, which we do sometimes, but you got to really know like, A, what is that property worth fixed up? What is the as is value? And then the difference is usually the repairs. And then that'll figure your exit strategy. So, like, for example, like the Poughkeepsie property we're working on right now, I know I could probably wholesale that for 150 to 160, most likely. Okay. It's worth about 375 fixed up, and it needs about 100 grand of work. So for me, as the disposition person in my company, I know I can exit at 150 to 160 to a cash buyer if it's vacant, right? So if I make him that 115 offer, I can go up to 120 if I have to, maybe 125 and still wholesale it. But at the same time, because of the repairs that it needs, it really is a unwholesaleable deal because like the only one who's going to buy that is a cash buyer.
Yep.
So you're probably going to be better off just wholesaling it regardless, because if you put it on the MLS, the only people who are going to want it are cash buyers. Most of those people are already on my list, right?
Yeah.
And then I got to get an agent involved and all that kind of stuff. So that deal, for example, or potential deal is either going to be a fix and flip or it's going to be a wholesale deal. The ability to wholesale that is pretty much getting eliminated because of the repairs that it needs.
Right. Okay, cool, man. So you mentioned novations. I didn't know you were doing novations out there. How's that experience been since you've been doing those? And
Yeah.
what's
It's a
that
little
look
bit of a
like?
learning curve because you have to kind of introduce a brand new like product or service to your company. So we're actively working that out right now. We got one in contract last week. One of them we got in contract. The other one was a wholesale deal that we're gonna, I believe, turn into a Novation now.
Okay.
For people who don't understand what a Novation is, real quick, it's basically when you guarantee a seller a net number, and instead of buying it yourself and wholetailing it, you're going to be in contract with that seller. They're going to get that net number, and while you're in contract, you're actually listing the property for sale on the MLS on the I like call the open market, as per Eric Brewer's suggestion, who's an
Yep.
expert at this. And you're looking to find a retail buyer to buy the property. And let's say you find a retail buyer, the seller and that retail buyer actually sign a brand new contract, and then you're in the middle and you get paid like an interest release fee. You get paid to basically cancel your contract.
Yep.
So it's a way to like wholesale a deal on the MLS.
It's like you basically cancel your contract
Yeah.
initially with the seller. It novates to the next person. You
Yes.
get paid the fee
Yeah.
for your interest in that
Yes.
deal.
And you have all the liability of the commissions and the repairs and all that shit if you need to. So
Yeah.
it's a creative way to do deals. So we're starting to do that now because we see the market shift, at least in our area, where the buyers are a little bit more picky. The sellers are still a little weird about selling at a discount. They're getting a little bit more open to it now with the news coming out saying the real estate market's changing, which is, I guess, working for us.
Right.
But it's a tool that we're adding to our tool belt. And the way I look at a novation is like, well, if we can do 2 of these novations a month minimum on the leads that we're already generating, and we can make $20,000 to $30,000 a deal, that's going to be another, 40 to 60K of revenue with no additional marketing costs on leads we already have.
It's brilliant, man. And I think that's the play. I see a lot of investors switching a little bit to that
Oh, it's
because
getting big now.
we're seeing the squeeze. We're feeling the squeeze. I think most investors and wholesalers are feeling that squeeze in the market with the cash buyers being just more particular. And we're
I
still
get it.
having yeah, I do too. You're buyer, we're buyer. We're still doing deals. What are you changing to continue to do business as
Yeah.
usual in this market?
There's two things. We're definitely doing the novations now, and we're getting good at like pitching it to where it like is a value proposition to the seller, not just like, oh, we're going to put your house in the MLS. We're like,
Yeah,
hey, you told me you don't want to deal with realtor. You told me you don't want to deal with the repairs. You told me you want a guaranteed number. You told me you don't want to like, et cetera. So we're working on our presentation on how we can solve their problem.
right.
And at the same time, with our wholesale deals, if we're like, we call them tweeners, if we don't know if they're a deal or not, we're telling the seller what we're trying to do. And if we're going to only wholesale their house and we don't want to take it down, we tell the seller what we're going to do. We say, listen, I know you want your 175 for the property. And for us to buy it straight cash and have a guaranteed closing, we need to be at 150. So if you're stuck at 175, let's pretend this is like a piece of shit house, not a novatable house. We're
Right.
saying, listen, we can try at 175. We're going to go out and we're going to try to sell it to an investor for a profit. We're going to have 10 days to do that. And at the end of 10 days, if we have no luck, we'll let you know. And no harm, no foul. So we're basically telling
Love
the
that.
seller what we're trying to do before we actually get them on contract, because we don't want to waste their time and we don't want them to have the wrong expectations.
Yep.
So we're a lot more transparent with our wholesale stuff if it's only a wholesale deal. And at the same time, we are making our offers lower than normal because of the market. So like, let's say the values drop 10%.
Right.
And that happens in 6 months, right? Like we're taking like the AR, let's say the ARV was going to be, 400, right? And it drops 10%, you're really going to be at about 360. So we're looking at that deal as it's worth 360 versus worth 400. And then we're making our offer based on the 360 exit. And then maybe it sells for more, but if it doesn't, we're like adjusting those numbers to where the deal still financially makes sense.
Yeah, and I can just feel like somebody who's watching this or listening to this, what they're thinking. They're like, "Oh my gosh, Greg, you told the seller that you're gonna wholesale their house. Like you didn't really say it, but I'm gonna bring in another investor." But by doing that again, it just totally it sets the stage for the rest of the experience for that lead and through that contract. Because if you have to go back to them, it's not going to be a big surprise.
No,
You kind
not
of
at
let
all.
them know up front, and by doing that, it's like now there's not going to be some angry seller.
No, and you just set the expectations and like, if they don't want to do that, they don't want to do that. And you can find out now. But the last thing you want to do is guarantee a seller a number and then have to and you're not telling what you're doing. And then all of a sudden you can't sell it. And you're like, hey, remember I
Yeah.
told you I was gonna give you 350? Well, sorry about that. I'm done. And then they're pissed. And then they're like, oh, what the hell? But if you tell them the truth, like they might say no, but they probably will say yes if they're motivated. That's another thing too. Like, never underestimate the power of a motivated seller. If they're motivated to sell their house, they will do whatever it takes to sell their house. And if they have to
Absolutely.
comply with your wholesale terms, a lot of the times they will, right? And they're not going to give you that much resistance, especially when you're upfront with them.
Yeah,
Like,
man.
you tell them
We've been doing that a lot. Like we've adjusted. We've been doing that, setting the stage. And if it's too tight, it's like, hey, listen, here's what we can do. If you're open to that, we're gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll let you know. We're not here to waste anybody's time, because we've all had the deal where it's just strung on for way too long, and you were so optimistic that you're gonna sell it, and it never sold, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I just wasted 20 hours of my time
right.
or my disposition's time.
And your contractor has to keep coming through the house. That pesky contractor who also has the check to write the check for the sales price.
Yeah,
Then
isn't
you're at
that
the closing and you're like, the seller's like, wait a minute. That's the contractor? Oh, yeah, he also happens to be a financial lender too. Oh, and he's also the buyer. Yeah,
and
'cause
he
he's
is an
the lender.
appraiser.
Yeah, it's complete bullshit. I have a friend in Long Island. You know Michael Pinter in Investor Fuel?
I do, yeah.
He is literally one of my favorite people on planet Earth. And he actually, I was in his office a couple weeks ago. He has a hat that he wears. His son made the hat up, like it printed it out, like and it says like XYZ home inspections or XYZ insurance adjusters. And he'll go to a tenant's house with that hat on so the tenant doesn't get scared. So you like keep the tenant at bay, and then like he'll buy the house and he'll knock on the door and, oh yeah, I happen to also buy properties.
Isn't it funny how you put on one hat and you put up a totally different vibe for
Yeah.
these tenants?
Oh my gosh. I've been the insurance guy a few times on multifamily proproperties. I'm the insurance guy walking around,
Right. Yeah. I'm taking some measurements and notes
yeah,
here.
it's a game.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Well, good stuff, Greg. Hey, since we talked in Dallas, you kind of talked about doing some more, potentially some campaigns. I heard you say Google Ads. How's that been going since Dallas? What have you
Yeah, it's been
changed?
good. I mean, we did the Vegas deal, we did the deal in Phoenix. Hopefully we have another 20K wholesale deal closing soon
Okay.
from PPC. And then we hopefully, I mean, I don't want to get my hopes up, but we have an accepted offer of 600, or no, we have an accepted offer of 650. In New York, we say accepted offer until it's signed. We
Yeah.
have a 650 accepted offer, and we have a potential buyer for 725,
All
which was
right.
quite nice from Google. Like, I don't get
Boom.
excited until the money's in my account.
Yep.
But overall, yeah, those leads have been solid. I mean, they're generally motivated people,
Ready to go.
and generally they're interested in selling at a discount, which is lovely for us. And I've just found with Google, the lead quality is much better.
Yep.
And the sales cycle is a lot shorter too, because generally when they're calling you, they want to sell now, not,
Today.
oh, maybe in a couple months.
Yeah. Speaking of which, how important is it to get back to those people like now?
Well, if no one answers, we have a live answering service that calls them back within a minute. So that's how important it is. If
That's
one of
amazing.
us can't get back to them, we have a live answer sequence that, like, a company we hired called Answer Connect, will actually call those leads back on the spot.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable, man. I've never heard of them before, but
yeah.
that's good to know. I learned
It's a
something new
good, yeah,
today.
it's a good like backup plan, right? Because, like, if it's 2 in the morning, well, 2 in the morning is not the case, but if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and everyone's on the phone and I'm, at the gym working out, someone's got to call those people back.
Right.
So we have an answering service that does that for us, which is nice.
Answer Connect. Okay, cool. We
Yeah.
use Pat Live, so they just answer the phones when the calls come in, but
Yeah.
they do not call back, which
So you want the call? Pat Live doesn't do the callback. I tried them on that. So Answer Connect will, like, when they fill out the form, it like sends them an email and then they'll call them back, which is nice. Because the
beautiful.
name of the game is getting on the phone with these people, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you get on the phone with these people, you have a pretty good chance. But if they're calling 5 investors and you don't call them back within 20 minutes, you're screwed.
Yeah, I mean it's frustrating too, and Google Ads is not exactly cheap. And so, what are you spending
No.
now a month on Google Ads to get these leads?
About $3,000 a month of
Okay,
spend.
that's really pretty reasonable,
Reasonable.
honestly.
Yeah.
So, with that 3 grand, are you hyper focusing on those few markets to bring in those leads in like Vegas and Phoenix and
Yeah.
New York, or are you
So we're
testing out
doing
different
it.
areas?
The thing I've realized with Google is that when you spread your budget out over different territories, the leads are cheaper, because what you're doing is basically, when someone's like, for example, in New York, if everyone's bidding on one keyword and someone blows their budget out for the day, I can still step in and when they blow their budget out for the day, I still probably have budget left because I'm also advertising in different areas. So I can step in and buy that traffic. Same thing in Vegas, same thing in San Diego, same thing in South Carolina, same thing in Arizona. So when you can spread your budget out, and I'm not an expert in PPC, I know a little bit about it, but when you can spread your budget out, right, you're basically stepping into other people's shoes when they blow out their budgets for the day. So, like, for example, like Phoenix and Vegas and San Diego and even New York, it's competitive. But when you can spread that budget out, you can step in and you can buy that traffic when people max out their daily budgets. So you can still get a pretty affordable lead cost, right? But if you're just focusing on one area, you're competing with a lot of people for that space, and you're all fighting for the same thing. But if you can kind of spread it out to different areas, you're still going to get a cheaper lead, sort of, and you can still make your budget work. That's what I've noticed to work with Google versus just doing it in one local market.
Yeah, man, that's great advice, and I've heard the same.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of money on Google Ads. Been doing it for a
Just
couple
in your
years.
Omaha? Just in
Uh,
Omaha?
nope, we have one campaign in Omaha. Maybe this is where I need to reconsider after what you said. And then I have another nationwide campaign where we're
Yeah.
running in like 5 or 6 different markets.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed about the nationwide campaign versus my more centralized just on Lincoln and Omaha is that we're getting leads that it seems like other people who are running campaigns maybe in that city. So, for example, we're running a campaign in actually San Diego right now,
Lovely.
and so I have a lead in California, but it seems like somehow these people find us outside of the city that we want to find these deals
Yeah.
in. So, like a lot of smaller towns, and a lot of lately a lot of listed properties coming from our
Yeah, I'm
Google
seeing that
Ads.
too. We're seeing people are starting to panic now with the market change. So we're seeing a lot of that, wholesalers and listed properties and all. It's just part of the game with Google.
It is. And so I guess, are you seeing much of the like outside of the city leads? Because I don't care to see these in the middle of nowhere, but I'm getting a lot of them and they're kind of just getting discarded because can't wholesale a house in a town of 1,000. You can. Never say
Yeah, you'd
never,
have to
but
probably put it
it's
on the MLS.
yeah, it's just a little harder.
No, not really. I mean, once in a while we will, but not like it's not like a common thing we're seeing. Like most of our stuff is going to come in like the area we want it in. We will get a rural lead once in a while, and yeah,
Don't
we'll
do anything
try
with
it
it or
maybe, but a lot of times we'll just tell them like, listen, we're going to have to put this on the MLS because like I don't even know where your town is. But
yeah.
for the most part, we're not seeing as much, at least with what we're doing right now.
Got you. Okay. Very cool. Perfect, man. Well, hey, for anybody who's watching this live, if you have questions for Greg, we're going to be wrapping this up in about 5 minutes, but just make sure to drop the questions below and we'll save a few minutes for him to answer some of your questions. So,
Hell
uh,
yeah.
getting a lot of value myself, man. So I appreciate the good information.
I love
Um,
doing podcasts, man. I love being the guest more than the host. It's a lot easier.
yeah, for
Don't
sure.
tell
For
anyone.
sure.
Don't tell my team that. They'll be like, what the hell are you talking
Yeah, and by the way, like there's a lot of stuff we've talked about. We've covered basically what you're doing in the change in market. We've covered some innovations. We've covered some marketing, sales process. If you got value from today's show, please share this with a friend. Tell somebody about it. Like, subscribe, all of this stuff. It really helps a lot. Greg, you have a podcast. We don't charge people for these podcasts,
No, they're
and
free as
a
could
lot,
be.
a lot of good value coming from these. And so,
Oh, yeah.
um, but yeah, so if you have questions, drop them below. Outside of that, man, what's the future hold for you? I know you've been picking up rental properties here in New York. I'd love to hear how
Yeah,
that's going. And
that's interesting.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, I started buying rentals in like 2020, so like 2 years ago. And I had 9 at one time, and then I sold 5 of them. One of them was like a 4-unit mixed use building that I lost money on, which is an interesting story. And then a little bit of money, not crazy money. But then the other one, the guy moved out and I just flipped it. So right now I got 4 left at the moment. They're actually all condos and townhouses, which people normally don't like, but I really like that because the maintenance is minimal. And one of them, I got a non-paying tenant. So we're doing a good old eviction, which is fun.
yep.
Just kidding. It's like getting waterboarded financially. And the other 3 are pretty good properties. So I like to buy rentals even cheaper than flips because if I'm going to do the burr, which everyone talks about, you got to get that thing cheap because there's a lot of
Yep.
closing costs with refis. And you got to take into the fact that if you're getting a rental property cheap, it's probably for a reason. Usually the tenant's shot and you got to do a goal eviction. So I love to buy rentals, right? I love them. That's how my net worth really started going up, is by owning real estate, holding real estate, not just flipping real estate or wholesaling it. So I'm looking every month to buy more rentals. We run into a lot of deals that just don't make sense as a rental. So I will flip that or wholesale that. But my goal by the end of the year is to have 10 properties.
Wow.
I got 4 right now. So I probably need to buy a couple multis to hit that goal. Or the next quarter, just really start banging out more condos and single family rentals kind of suck, but
Yeah.
at the right number, they're all right. But I really look for condos and townhouses for me to own.
Okay.
Because of the low maintenance and it's pretty easy to figure the value of those things. And I've just found that, at least in my area, you can still get really high rent with a condo or a townhouse. And, you can make that make sense and people really want to live there unless it's in the hood. But I don't mind that either if it's the right number.
Right.
But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now with rentals. We're looking to get them all off market and burr them or own them in cash. Like one of them I own just in cash because it's pretty cheap.
Nice.
And, I like them. I call this one I have, it's called the lifetime paycheck. I bought it for cash for 46 and it rents for 1,100 a month and it makes like $600 a month net.
Steady Eddie.
Steady Eddie spaghetti. Right. So
I love it.
yeah. The HOA is like 281 a month. I think the taxes are like $200 a month or something like that. The insurance is like $600 a year.
Bad.
And never seen it. Never met the tenant. Never been inside.
Is this New York?
Yeah, it's in Newburgh, New York. Yeah.
New York. Okay.
What
Is
is
that
that
where you're,
address?
is that where you're looking?
What?
Is that where you're looking to continue
Yeah,
to
just because
buy?
most of our leads are there. So it's like, we don't really need to recreate the wheel. We have all this momentum there. So when we get leads in New York, it's like, I know the area. I know a lot of people, I'm from there. I go back there a lot. It's just easier to do that for now versus like just going to a brand new market and, market, and that's just a pain in the ass.
Yep.
So if we get Google ad leads and they're in like decent areas, like I'd consider keeping them as a rental. But New York, we have all the momentum and the connections and the resources and, the team and whatnot. So it's just a lot easier to operate there for now, at least.
Yeah, I love it, man. You're set up and it makes sense.
Yes,
Good
sir.
stuff, Greg. Well, hey, man, I appreciate your time. Again, thank you for coming on Labor Day, while the rest of the other people are out there hanging out at the lake. We're talking real estate, and we're going to you provided a ton of value. So very thankful, man, for coming on here.
My pleasure.
If anybody has any last thoughts, drop them below. Otherwise, Greg, we're going to wrap it up. And where can people find out more about you, man?
Sure. They can email me, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or they can follow me online on Instagram at Grego, Grego, like the letter, the letter, Grego_37. I put out a lot of content on there. So if you send me a message, I will get back to you.
All right, guys, you heard it there. Go follow Greg. He has his own podcast as well. So where can people listen to your podcast?
Yes, it's currently called Pave the Way Podcast, but I believe we're going to rename it to the Real Estate Fast Track, or the Fast Track for Real Estate. We're changing the name soon, so we have our meeting tomorrow to go over that.
I dig it, man. I dig it. Well, thanks again, Greg. We'll talk to you next time, man.
My pleasure.
All right, take care. See you guys.